Are we live? Okay, we're live. It's kind of awkward. Don't you find it awkward where it's just like we just hit the button and then we just go and it's like no different? Damn it, I
Well,
need a goddamn theme song
yeah, you
or
remember
like a
that,
text voiceover.
or well, he'll do it for you, or you could do what I did, where I just had sometimes I do the thumbnail, right? And you're very good about creating thumbnails, and just you put it up, you start there, you do your theme song, and again, you don't have to do the theme song, right? You've got to like go to brand. If you scroll
Yeah,
down,
but you
there's
had
a
a
whole thing
theme
for background.
song.
Well,
You have a theme song.
I
Rob's got a
dude,
theme song. Texas
I
got a
just
theme
dude,
song.
I just used the rock like right here. See, I just used rock.
Oh, that's a thing. I could just put on music.
Yeah, scroll down. Go to brand and scroll down. See?
Okay,
but
that's not K-pop though. That's not me.
Okay, fine. Dude, they've got all kinds of free music. Talk to Tex. There's all kinds of things you can
do. God damn it, I wish I was friends with BTS. And then I could just be like, hey, RM, can I get this to some licensing rights to play your song for the beginning of my show? I just want to blast BTS on my own goddamn show. That's me, That's my heart. Anyway, I forgot we were live. Hey, Jason. What's up? What's up, everyone in the chat? What's up, Derek Galloway?
Ooh,
hello, be kind. My sister from another mister. What's up, Glenn Dannison? And it's Wink at Me. Hey. Okay, I guess we can start.
Should we?
Yes, we
should.
Ooh,
dance pop. Oh, come on. This is such
Wait, that funk track that you used to have, was that one of those music files that was available?
Yeah, but I think you can add it. Like if you scroll, there's an add music.
Hey, Blue Crossroads. What's up, dude?
You'd want to talk to Tex about that one. I don't know where he got it, but I think the funk one should be.
Hey there, Gemini Moon. Okay, so I'm going to introduce the topic.
Sure.
All right, so
I'm
going to share with a little something with the chat that I just shared with you right before we started. Today, folks, is a milestone.
It is.
In Jason and Donnie's friendship, because today, the 15th of November, 2023, is the official 1-year anniversary that you and I first met and did that first show together. And I know this, folks, because it's also the first day that I started at my job. So it kind of matches up, right? Okay.
All right, Jason, I'll stop it.
Damn it, I knew I was going to regret giving you the controls. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, hey, folks. Hey, Mike A. Hi there, Gemini. Hey there, Wink at Me. So
I'll be serious.
You and I have done a buttload of shows together on your channel, Jason McLean Questions Everything, and we've also had some deep conversation on his channel, Rob's channel.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever been on the Blonde's channel.
I thought you've been on. I don't think we've been on the Blonde's channel together, but I thought you'd done.
No, you've been. I've never been on. I've never been on the Blonde's channel, and now I take that personally, even though
I thought. No, I swear, I thought you were on the Blonde. I thought you were on the Blondes.
No, my first appearance is going to be tomorrow. Donnie Chill makes his debut. Anyway, hey there, it's Mike Bothwell. What's going on, dude? Blue Crossroads. It's been a while, my friend. I haven't seen you in a minute. I was wondering about you. Okay. Anyway, so you and I have done a bunch of shows together. A lot of shows about cryptids, some deep ancient history stuff, some biblical stuff, and some dinosaur stuff, right? Some all sorts of like weird shit that you and I are both mutually into, right?
Yes.
So throughout these numerous shows, I've noticed that you've brought up some points of views on dinosaurs, especially with the way it fits in with creationism and the biblical worldview, because that is the worldview that you yourself espouse, if I may speak for you. So the topic of dinosaurs does come up, and you have some, I guess it would say, very controversial points of views when it comes to deep time and how dinosaurs fit. How they fit into the biblical worldview. And you've expressed these opinions on numerous shows, on your shows and other people's shows. Yeah. But then one day I realized we've never done a dedicated show where you just spill the beans on everything, your actual worldview, just focus on just dinosaurs. So that's what we
No,
are
you're
here
right.
tonight to do. Because
Yeah,
you've
when you
mentioned
mentioned that,
dinosaurs quite a bit.
oh yeah, well,
Yeah.
obviously, yeah. But you're right. No, like I hadn't even thought about it until you said it. It's like I have sort of touched around, and let's be honest, everyone should probably know where I stand on this. But at the same time, you're right. We've never actually just had the conversation. It's like
Mhm.
this is my thought, and
You've
usually
always referenced it,
I've
but
referenced it,
never
but I've never
actually
actually
talked
said it.
about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So we are going to
that's a good one.
rectify that tonight, folks.
Yep.
So
Hold on, real quick. For
let's
those, I only not that one. It jumped up. Mike or no, Be Kind had we're gonna need another Timmy. I love that was one of my favorite things from that show, Dinosaurs. They had like
which
the
was
Mr. Wizard. They had like the Mr. Wizards, like television show. It was like their
Mhm.
version of Mr. Wizard. In every episode, those kids who would come in and help Mr. Wizard, they
Mhm.
had that, but it was a dinosaur. It was always like the same dinosaur named Timmy, but Timmy always got blown up, electrified, crushed, set on fire. And the punchline was always, "We're gonna need another Timmy." Sorry, I'm
Quick
a
question.
little in mood today.
Speaking of that show, Dinosaurs, remember there was that
Mhm.
one episode where there was that like giant ass dinosaur that even like
Yes.
the regular
Mhm.
dinosaurs were afraid of, and it was like eating them in one bite. What kind of what was that supposed to be?
I can't remember off the top of my head.
Was that supposed to be a mosasaurus?
I don't know. I'd have to look that one up. I vaguely I
Yeah,
remember the episode.
I
I just don't
vaguely
remember what it
remember
was
there was
supposed
this
to be.
one episode where Earl, the
Mhm.
megalosaurus, right, and Roy, the T-Rex,
Yeah.
they're out and about, and then this sea dinosaur just comes out, and they're like, "Oh my god!" Like it was Godzilla or something. And I'm like, "Hey, what dinosaur was?
Yeah.
What kind of dinosaur would do that to a T-Rex?"
Yeah, I guess it would have to have been. Yeah, I'll have to look that up because I don't remember.
Hey
'Cause
there,
I barely
RCC.
remember that episode, but I do love the we're gonna need another Timmy.
Okay, so let me ask you this first
Mhm.
question. Let's start simple, okay?
Yeah.
As a person who is a defender and proponent of the biblical worldview, what
Yep.
happens when some asshole comes up to you and just says, "Well, I don't believe in the Bible or this creation
Mhm.
story because what about dinosaurs?" How do you?
Well,
What is
usually,
your counterattack to that?
so usually what I
How
say
did
is,
God create the Earth in 7 days? What about dinosaurs? Duh. You know how people are all like smug about it.
yeah,
Duh,
oh yeah,
dinosaurs.
and it is that attitude. So the first words out of my mouth are, Donnie, shut up. Secondly, no,
It's
so
not me.
seriously,
That's not my point of
I know.
view.
It's a
Yeah.
has it been that long? Has it been that long, Donald? Um, but no. So the first thing I would say is, and usually they're not that obtuse, but the point I would always make is the biblical worldview. Again, let me just start with where I'm at, and we'll go from
Mhm.
there.
Okay.
I am a young Earth creationist, but I'm very flexible with what I mean by young Earth. Right?
Mhm.
I I'm sort of agnostic on, is it a six, are we talking about 6,000 years ago? Are we talking about 7,000 years ago? Or are we talking about 15 to 20,000 years ago?
Mhm.
And the reason for the discrepancies are, you have the Masoretic text, which is what most modern Bibles sort of use as their touchstone. When you use, you sort of count up the ages, you get to about 6,000 years plus or minus, right?
Okay.
If you use the Septuagint, you kind of get like you get an extra 750 years, because the dates or the ages of the
Mhm.
patriarchs are like 100 years tacked on, which changes up a lot. And there's some arguments as to why that exists. And so you get, close to 7,000. And then you have, again, sort of the idea of, hey, the ages, because they all seem idealized, right? That this is more about, this is not really trying to say this is exactly what happened from an age range. They're trying, there's another point that the scripture is trying to get across. So we could be talking about a much longer period of time. Definitely like billions of years, but we could be talking about something that happened really 13 to 15,000 years ago rather than 6, right? So
Hey, Monster Ray,
that's
what's up, dude? I haven't seen you here in a while.
a monster. Um So we have that. So we have, from a textual perspective, we have that gap. I'm sort of agnostic on that, because I think if you're debating, is it 6,000, 7,000, 15 to 20,000, you're basically, that's three guys at a table eating chips and salsa and talking about it. But if it's like 6,000, or 4 billion with a 14 billion year old universe, it's like, that's a dude at another restaurant in another city, right? I don't, so I'm not really going to, like, I have my thoughts on the age, but I don't really, it's like, look, that's a question of how, not why. And for how, we need better science, because one of the issues that we have is actual science is getting erased, because when you follow up actual science, it supports a closer to the biblical worldview. And that's one of my big deals, is all I want is all the data on the table. So it's like, I'm not going to get in the fight. Is it 6 or 15? I'm not going to get in that fight, because all I want is everything on the table. But that's my thought, is we're talking about that kind of a time range for all of this, rather than billions of years, right? So to your question, someone walks up and says, well, what about dinosaurs? Well, obviously I'm going to kick up and say, oh, on the Christian side, there are people who will say, but dinosaurs didn't actually exist. They were, their bones were put there by Satan to test us. I've heard that, and it's insane.
That's a pretty cartoonish point of view. Do people actually believe that, though?
Okay.
Like Satan bones?
Yes, but it is a very, very small number of people. Like, it's like, that's a fringe within a fringe, right? It's like,
I mean, that's just a very... I feel like that would just be a very unnecessarily complex way for Satan to try to trick people. I mean...
Yeah, it's... Well, and it's just...
Wouldn't it be, Satan, wouldn't it be easier just to leave like porno mags around everywhere for like kids to find? I mean, that would work a lot better than planting fake dinosaur bones, right?
It would. You'd like, I mean, that would be a lot easier. But again, I've heard that, and it's like, so here's my problem. I've seen them, right? I've seen one. Again,
technically, you've actually seen one.
Yeah, so pterosaurs, not technically dinosaurs, they're flying reptiles. But let's be honest, it's a distinction I mean, it's a distinction with a difference that is true, but to the average common person, that is not, that's not, they don't get that difference, right? It's a flying reptile, not a dinosaur, but it's associated with them very, very closely, because it comes from that time frame. So yes, they were real. And one of the problems I have is when people say, well, what about dinosaurs? Is okay, but what is the reason for the idea that they went extinct 65 million years ago? See, that's my whole point, is the biblical worldview, whether it was 6 or 7 or 15, is sort of fundamentally relevant, because we're talking about thousands of years versus tens of millions of years. And the issue is, if we have accounts of dinosaurs, and we do, living today, then we got a problem. Now, and we'll come back to that idea, but a lot of people say, well, but that's just all mythology and whatever. Okay, fine. We'll come back to that. But what about the fact that we find unfossilized soft tissue within dinosaur bones? That's the problem, right? Because you can't have organic material just existing for tens of millions of years and having it still be viable. That's my problem. Like, we've got examples of blood in amber, right? That's still liquid. Okay, fine. I'm not going to call any harm or foul on that, because it's a perfectly encased, hermetically sealed environment, right? Amber. Fossilized bones don't give you that. And here's my problem. So it's not temperature controlled. You do have air moving in and out. You have all these things. And it wouldn't matter if it was, even if it was perfectly hermetically sealed, it would still degrade. That's the problem. It's going to degrade to be unusable. It will no longer be flexible. It will no longer be organic material. It should just rot away to dust. And we know, like, this is something we know, how long it takes to degrade. We know that. And you're telling me, even if you put it hemoglobin. Like we know one of the reasons we know Tyrannosaurus Rex is related to chickens is because we've tested its hemoglobin on antigens. And they're related to chickens. That's how we know for a fact they're related to chickens.
I bet you T-Rex might taste good then.
You know what? It may be gamey though.
Maybe, yeah.
Don't get me wrong. Ask you, I'm happy to give it a try.
Jason, I got to ask you definitively, give me your honest opinion, okay? How many years ago do you think dinosaurs lived?
So, like I said, I'm sort of agnostic, but I mean, if I, again, gun to my head, I'm closer to the 6,000 to 7,000 year range.
See, I've always been in the 65 million year camp, only because that's all I've been brought up on. And that's not to say that I don't believe in the biblical worldview. I do think that there's a scenario where they both fit. Okay, how about this then? Do you at least subscribe, not the amounts of time or the scale of time, but what about the order in which, or the sequence in which these animals appear, right? Like Dimetrodon, okay? Dimetrodon, that was a Permian era creature, more akin to mammals than they were to dinosaurs. Right. And they were, if you go by the mainstream point of view, right, the distance between dinosaurs and us is actually shorter than the distance from dinosaurs to Dimetrodon.
Yeah. So
before dinosaurs, there was a time when they had like these giant ass gnarly proto mammals that were pretty much running the show, and they were pretty fucked up, some of them. Dinosaurs weren't the only crazy creatures or the first ones.
Oh, there's all kinds of
my question is
craziness.
Do you subscribe to like the order? Like Dimetrodon came first, and then the Archaeosaurs, and then the dinosaurs, and then the Jurassic, and then T-Rex towards the end. Do you at least believe in that? Subscribe to that sequence?
Oh no. And again, great question. Here's why. Everything's built, all of these theories on where things should go. No one just said, okay, we're going to dig here and look, here's all the layers. We know what layer this is. We know what layer this time frame comes from. And we find this thing here and this thing here and this thing here. And it's the same across the planet. That's not how that works. I think, and I'm going to come to fossilization in a second because this is a big point. What I think we're looking at is not different periods of time. What we're looking at is when we see these things, what we're seeing is entire ecosystems that have been fossilized. Right? That's the issue. We are not finding different epochs. We're finding different environments that are fossilized. And so to bring it back to fossilization, and this goes back to the whole point of, of the soft tissue in the non-fossilized organic material that we find. One of the stories you were told growing up, just like I was, is that the fossils are evidence of that the fossilization is evidence of deep time because it takes millions and millions of years to make a fossil. Well, that's a bold-faced lie. One of the last episodes I did was with Lost World Museum, and we have some disagreements on things. But one thing he points out, and one thing he does very, very well, and that's why I wanted to have him on, was that they do a great job of showing mineralization, i.e. fossilization, happens very, very quickly. And if you're like, well, okay, so sure, maybe, in the right conditions with water, you can mineralize things in a matter of weeks. Right.
Okay.
But think about this. I'm going to throw up a couple issues here. Of course, I was already scrolled all the way down. There we are. I love fossils. I really do. My favorite type of fossils are fish fossils. They're my favorite. You can buy fish fossils real cheap.
Okay.
Sorry, my dog.
Oh, your dog decided to fuck up the show. At least it's not my dog today. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so why fish fossils? Why do you like them so much?
I think they're pretty. I just find them interesting.
Okay.
However, one of the things that's really interesting. Why is she freaking out that bad? Okay, now I'm wondering if I need to pull my gun. Okay, we're fine. This is not just a fossil. This is an impression of a fish, right?
Okay.
And here's the thing. These fossils like this exist all over the planet. In fact, the vast majority of all fossils are aquatic. Think about how fast that thing has to fossilize to get all that fine detail. Same thing with this one. And you'll notice something really interesting. They're both eating other fish.
Yeah.
They were fossilized eating another fish.
Okay.
This ichthyosaur, which is the I think you've pointed out as well, and I agree, is the worst of all marine reptiles.
Oh, you agree with me there, right?
Yeah.
It's like a crappier dolphin that's less intelligent.
Yeah, it's just yeah, I agree. But it's
a
literally
shitty dolphin,
giving,
folks.
It really is. But it's giving live birth. And it was fossilized giving birth. That thing right there in the back, that's just below the tail, that's the baby ichthyosaur.
Yep.
We know this. So think of how quickly they had to be fossilized. And it wasn't just they die, because the story we're told is you die and you lay down and then you're fossilized. That can't possibly be what's happening here, because these things were fossilized eating something, which means it happened really, really quickly, or giving live birth. And it not only happened quickly, it was catastrophically fast. Something hit them, flattened. They were flattened under the material and fossilized very rapidly. We have whole schools of fish that are fossilized, like just being fish, like they're just there, and then all of a sudden they're fossils.
Can I ask you a question?
That fast.
If you said the fossilization process was so quick, do we have any like fossils of like two ichthyosaurs like fucking?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, I was just wondering.
Yeah, well, they're reptiles. They wouldn't really do. Yeah,
I had to ask.
I know you would.
I had to ask. It's my show. I can ask whatever goddamn question I want. I forgot about that sometimes.
Real quick, they have found fossils of dinosaur eggs in a row, and a lot of people have theorized that what happened was they were laying eggs, but they were also trying to escape. But it's like you're plopping out eggs, you can't really. And so that was one. It's like they were escaping something that probably then fossilized them. Again, evidence of rapid fossilization. This hadrosaur.
Okay. What? Oh, I remember that one. I know that one. Yeah, I'm familiar with that.
Yeah. Internal organs and meat tissue fossilized.
When I first heard about that, I was like, they actually found organs and shit? What the fuck? Yeah. I watched a documentary on it and everything.
Oh yeah. No, and this is not the only one. It's very, very rare to get that kind of detail, but we do have it. We have fossilized skin on dinosaurs. This is my favorite. This is they call it the dinosaur mummy.
This is one of the best ones.
Yeah, this is one of the best fossilized or best specimens of a fossilized ankylosaur on the planet. It's all we get to actually see what it
is really that fossilized or is that mummified?
No, it's fossilized. They call it a mummy.
That one's
because
fossilized?
You get soft tissue. Yeah, it's still a fossil, right? It's all stone. It's been mineralized. However, you get the fine detail. But again, that means the skin, tissues, things like that have to mineralize. Think about how fast that stuff degrades and just turns to dust. This means the mineralization happened rapidly. Well, mineralization happens rapidly, creating a fossil, when there's water involved. So what's the biblical paradigm? Everything was cool. People screwed it up. Eventually God's like, we need to try this again. And there's a cataclysmic flood. Not just a flood like, it talks about the fountains of the deep opening. It is a cataclysmic event that reshapes the planet. And this explains all of the fossils that we see, because so many of our fossils, think about it, they're all together. Even David Hatcher Childress, who you see all the times on Ancient Aliens, he points out, or he's very famously pointed out, every time you drive out to the desert and you see buffalo skeleton, right? Or you go out into someone's backyard, on the ranches. I used to do this all the time as a kid. A cow would die, and you'd find really cool cow skulls and bones and things like that. None of those are ever going to be fossilized.
Can I ask you a philosophical question now?
Sure.
Okay.
It's your show.
So in order for your argument, and I'm not arguing against you, so
Yeah,
I'm playing
I
devil's
know.
advocate on this one. In order for your argument to be the valid one, it's not just paleontology that's got to be completely fucking wrong about everything. Then geology also has to be completely fucking wrong about everything, right? Our general understanding of biology.
Well, no, biology doesn't change.
But geology does.
It does.
Because that's the biggest thing where people get their time frames is through geology, and that's where they go off the sediment layers, all right? And if this fossil is found this deep down, that means it was from this many years ago, right?
Right.
All of that shit has to be completely wrong then.
Well,
right?
so here's the yes, no, it does. And so let me throw this out here. All throughout history, science has always been wrong. Because think about it, that's how we advance. Our understanding of the natural world, it's like, no, this is wrong. Okay, let's replace. And so everyone was wrong, and then we got right or righter about something. The simple fact of the matter is, a lot of these ideas are based on two things: assumptions and then funding. Because when there are scientists and paleontologists who come out and say, hey, this is wrong, these ideas are wrong, let me show you the evidence, they no longer get to be those things. See, the problem is, if you funding, the people with the money don't want let me phrase this, a lot of people with money don't, the people who who really do control the higher institutions, they don't want certain conversations happening. So you don't get that funding.
Would that mean, does that mean then everyone is fucking wrong about everything then?
Well, the thing is, it doesn't have to
Can't
be
some people be right about some things?
Well, so here's the thing. Yeah, there's all kinds of things that you can be right about. So here, like one of the big, going back to geology, right? The argument is uniformitarian geology versus what's called catastrophic geology.
Okay.
Today, we can measure how quickly things, stalactites grow, things like that, tectonic shift as far as geology. And that's valid because we're watching it, we're observing it. The problem is uniformitarian geology says everything stayed the same the entire time. No big events, everything's the same, and therefore that's how we're dating it. That's the basic plan, right? A catastrophic geologist would come and say, hold on, yes, these things are happening at this speed now, but cataclysmic events give you the same thing that fast. So the question becomes, what's the best evidence for that? Which model actually explains what's out there? One of my favorite places in the world is the Enchanted Desert out west, right? New Mexico, Arizona area. Anyone who's been out there will tell you it's absolutely beautiful. And one of the most spectacular aspects is you have what's called, the painted desert, where you can see the rock strata, right? Okay. And they're all different colors, and it's very prominent. It's very beautiful. The problem is those rock strata remain consistent for hundreds of miles in all directions. The reason that's a problem is, think about if you're over 40, you can remember, if you grew up in a city, I can't help you, but you can think about how much landscapes can change in just a few decades, right?
Yeah.
With erosion,
you see it on other planets.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. But just think about how often your backyard, things erode, and we can watch it, like walls collapse, right?
Yeah.
In archaeology, we see this all the time. Rock strata is not always the same. That, in fact, what happens is stratas will shift and change because our planet is always shifting and changing. So it's very, very odd that we have all of this rock strata in this, and it's not just there. It's all over the place where we have locations where we're for hundreds of miles in all directions. We don't have the normal kind of sloping and curling and twisting that you would expect from something that developed over millions and millions of years. Rather, it looks more like what we have is sediment of different densities that have settled at the bottom of a jar. Like you take a jar, you put different types of dirt in it, fill it with water, shake it up, and it'll settle according to density. That looks more like what we actually see. And one of the other reasons for that is you have these multi-strata fossils.
Okay.
That's not that. Hold on. Here it is. This is a great example of that. That's a tree trunk. And these exist. These multi-strata fossils are found all over the planet. And what you have is a fossil tree, right? Going through multiple layers of strata. And each one is supposed to represent thousands or even tens of thousands of years, depending on the location. And yet we don't see the traditional erosion one would expect on this petrified wood. We just don't find it. It's basically that whole block is pristine. And some will even have root structures that go down even further. This isn't a one-off thing. Like I'm happy to say anything can happen.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense that doesn't make sense.
Right.
You know what? I'm listening to everything you're saying about science, and it is actually getting me to consider a certain point of view, but not necessarily your point of view, nor my own original point of view. I'm starting to consider your points about science, and it's making me start to think, what if everything Jason's saying right now is true? But then that would mean instead of being 65 million years ago for the dinosaurs, or 125, right, in the Mesozoic era.
Yeah.
Based off what you're telling me, I'm starting to think maybe it was something more like just 10 million years ago.
So, again,
science is completely wrong, but it's, that's still a lot smaller than 65 million years ago.
Right. So here's the thing. Yeah, like even the distance between 10 million and 6,000 is a lot smaller than 10 million and 65 million or 120 or 200 million, right?
Yeah.
So that's about, again, all I want is the details out there. But my problem is it's going back to the rapid fossilization, right? All of these fossils, if what we see, the reason things were fossils is that they were fossilized in the actual flood itself, right? The flood of Genesis.
Oh, the flood.
Like the flood, like all these things were all hanging around at the same time. What we're seeing is fossilized environments. We're not really seeing, again, millions of years and different. What we're seeing is one event that catastrophically. Now, again, some people will say, "Well, what about the Genesis or the Luciferian flood?" I'm not a proponent of the gap theory, but if you want to throw that in there, that's fine. Again, I'm happy to have that conversation. However, my point is, the better argument is that we have seen catastrophic events in the past that change the planet catastrophically. Bury these creatures, which is why they're fossilized in the first place. That's why we have them preserved. Anyone who's spent any time in the country knows if a cow dies, that skeleton's gone in a week. Like maybe you'll find the skull, you'll find the hips, some of the, or maybe in a bone over here, but that thing doesn't stay intact for very long. We have fossilized clamshells all over the place. The thing is, some of them are closed. A clamshell will force itself open very quickly after death. So if it's fossilized closed, that means it was alive, didn't really have time to die, just was killed. It was killed in the fossilization process. We have a lot of times where we see fossils going through multiple strata. That's not supposed to happen. So I go back to, going back to the initial question of, but what about dinosaurs? Well, what about dinosaurs would actually lead us to think that we're talking about not just millions, tens upon tens of millions of years instead of a few thousand. Because I think there's a much better argument that we're looking at thousands of years. Whether it's 6 or 7 or 15 is irrelevant to me. If it's thousands,
but what if it's 500,000?
again, the difference between 500,000.
I just don't understand why it has to be so small. I mean, I feel like 6,000 feels like such a small number. You know what I mean?
It's a small world after all, Donnie.
Like, does it have to be that soon ago? I
I
mean,
mean,
what
that's
about, because I feel like, what about like, okay, 2 million? I feel like that's a good, because you can, you know what? If you think about the concept of a million years, right? It's kind of hard to wrap your brain around it because
Oh
our
yeah.
lives are like what, right? And then you think about a millennia, okay? Because sometimes I think, okay, think about everything that happened from 1000 AD to now, right?
Oh yeah,
That's a lot
stuff.
of shit that can happen. A lot of shit can happen in 1,000 years, right? And imagine
Yes.
that a thousand times over. That's pretty hard to wrap your brain around. And then that amount, like
hold on,
100
1,000,000
times over.
But think about that. So a 1,000 years, right? 1,000 years. We can sort of put our brains around that.
Yeah.
A million years is 10 sets of 100,000 years. That's a lot of time. That's a lot of time. I would ask the question of, because I don't really care how old things are. My concern is what's the evidence? How do we have it? Let's work back from it. Because I'm open to the idea that Genesis is mostly theological. I think it happened, but there's a lot of theological language in it. It's constructed from a theological perspective. It's trying to teach us theological truths more than, it's not trying to be a newspaper, right? It's trying, but I do think it is trying to tell us a broader truth as well about the nature of our world and where we come from. But here's the thing. Why do we need to have millions of years when we have no real evidence of millions of years? People will say,
I think
what about
okay. I actually have a response to that. You know what I think it is? I think it's people building on here, then building on here, and because of this, they got to go off this assumption and therefore that, right?
Yes.
So
that's
we gotta go by, the paleontologists have to go by everything all the geologists say.
Yeah.
But they don't all the same thing. But the paleontologists are like, okay, we know dinosaurs are this old because this is the facts about geology. This is what they say. But I'm like, geologists can't even agree on.
Stop. Okay. That's the assumption everyone makes.
Yeah.
That is not how it worked. In fact, it isn't how it works at all. I go back to follow the money. Prior to the socialist revolution in France in the 1700s, everyone said, yeah, there was a giant cataclysmic flood in the order of thousands of years ago. And they pointed to things like erratics, which are these massive, very smooth boulders that are just sit in the middle of fields all over England. And so in the 1700s, these socialists, the socialist French said, after the revolution, said, we got to disprove the Bible because people forget these, again, socialists are anti-religion of any form. This is why the first thing that happens in any socialist regime is they go for the religions, right? Because you can't have anything higher than the state, right? So they literally, I mean, there's papers written on this where they put out and they said, we need a theory to disprove the flood. And the theory they came out with was the Ice Age, because you could use the Ice Age because the things you get from ice, the weathering, the movement of stones, you can get the same thing from an Ice Age that you can from a giant flood. That was the argument. And so this is why, to this day, it's been rather, I mean, it's only been real recently that you start seeing pictures of mastodons in like a plain, right? Traditionally, if you saw a woolly mammoth or you saw a woolly rhino, you saw anything from the Pleistocene era, everything was covered in ice, right? You remember seeing all that growing up. Everything's covered in ice.
Yeah.
Except there's no evidence that these creatures could even survive in cold temperatures. There's no evidence for any of these things being able to survive in cold temperatures. It's like, well, hold on, don't we have their frozen bodies? Yes, we do. Which is its own problem, because it isn't just that it froze them, it froze oftentimes what they were eating. We have these things frozen with summer grasses in their mouths. These woolly mammoths that have been frozen and found in the Siberian tundra were eating summer grasses and honeysuckle when they were frozen. Now, I ask you, Donald the Cho, how cold does it have to get, and how quickly does it have to get to go from summer to freezing something the size of a mammoth, and then
With
stay
like
cold enough
grass.
to keep it? Yeah, that is a catastrophic event that would do that. Think about that. That's not just okay, it got a little chilly. That's flash freezing something. I can't even imagine a weather system that could do that. And here's the thing, it has to stay frozen from that point. That means it's never gotten above freezing, because that's where they found the Siberian tundra, where it's cold and below freezing all the time. Those things have been frozen.
But the mainstream
since they were
scientific
frozen.
model would say that animals from the Pleistocene, like mammoths and saber-toothed tigers and shit, they're much closer to our timeline, right?
Yep.
Because they were around when humans were around, right? Like
Yeah.
even mainstream science acknowledges that.
Yes.
Right?
Well, they have to, because we show signs of human predation. They don't like it when we find bullet holes in their skulls. The Mexican government will show up with the federales and
has there been
so
tell me, has there been any evidence out there of humans living side by side with dinosaurs?
Yes.
Tell us, and please share.
Obviously we got things like the Delk print, which you saw. When you were with me, you saw the Delk print, where you have a theropod print and a human footprint in the same footprint. And
I remember that. They were like right side by side. I totally forgot about that.
Yeah, the human footprint
was like the riverbed.
Yes,
that dried out riverbed. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, the plexi.
Because I was like looking down, and you could tell these were like deep imprinted. And I was just looking down, like, what's a human footprint doing next to a dinosaur footprint like that? I was like, whoa.
Yeah, and we've
Jason, we got to talk a bit about that museum. Okay, let me introduce this museum, okay? So when Jason and I were together in Texas, Jason had to drop something off at this Creationist museum, right? So I was like, oh, one of those kooky Christian museums that say that like Jesus rode around on dinosaurs, one of those kooky ones. Okay. I was like, yeah, I'll go check it out. And, when I got there, I was expecting mostly like religious imagery, like crosses and lands and Jesus like petting a baby dinosaur or something. No, man, that shit was more like just a straight up dinosaur museum. I was pretty surprised. That guy had some impressive shit too.
Yeah.
And some of that equipment he had, I was like, whoa.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. No, the equipment's amazing. They've been given a massive infusion of money. They're building out a lab that's doing amazing work. But that's the point, right? Because you can. The problem is that academia will not allow this work to be done. Not because they don't have evidence, not because, there's no evidence for this, because they don't want there to be evidence for this. I have said this for a long time, and it's not because I made it up. If you're an archaeologist and you find the wrong thing, you become a florist. There are plenty of accounts of archaeologists, they find the wrong thing, and suddenly they're not archaeologists anymore. So much of archaeology and paleontology, even geology, when you deal with prehistory, is based on assumptions that are supported by funding that needs it to be true. And if you do work that does, there's a little documentary. It was actually really well done by Ben Stein. It's called No Intelligence Allowed, or Expelled, No Intelligence Allowed. They're not even talking about creationism. They're talking about just the concept of what's called intelligent design. Okay, intelligent design just says, is there evidence scientifically that when we look at the natural world, do we see evidence of chaotic chance, or do we see design elements in everything? And the problem is that question itself is not allowed. That, and the entire point is, yes, there's nothing but evidence of intelligent design. And intelligent design isn't really necessarily a specifically religious claim. It's not, a Muslim claim versus a Christian claim versus a Buddhist claim. It is simply a line of thinking that says, okay, is there evidence that we were actually here through random chaos and chance, or is it designed? What's the best evidence for it? What do we actually observe, right? We've talked about this on.
I mean, I think there are a lot more people in the mainstream scientific academia who do toy with that idea, though, especially when you get into like deep cosmology and physics and.
Oh yeah, and but that's the whole point. Is they deal with a lot of these scientists who will say, "Look, you do the work with intelligent design, but you have to leave that stuff out. You can't say that you used it because they don't like it because it doesn't get funding." We've talked about this.
You got these like Hindu guru guys who write all these books like claiming they know quantum physics, and they tie that with like Hindu guru mysticism, and they're like, oh, the quantum field theory, it's just like, all the Dharma or whatever, and you're like, okay, guy.
Right. Well,
okay, guy.
So there are, again, to your point, like there's always going to be nut jobs, right? Trust me, even on my side, I point them out. I'm like, Tyrannosaurus is not a test of faith. Please stop. Right. However, there's many more people who actually look at these things from a truly from a scientific perspective, which is, what does the data actually show us? And they come back and they say, hey, this worldview y'all are using doesn't comport with what we're actually finding. Again, Joe Taylor, right? The guy who made those replicas that I took to the Creation Evidence Museum. Most people probably know, if you've ever seen the picture of a guy with a big white beard and a cowboy hat standing next to a very large human femur or thigh bone, rather, that's Joe Taylor. He made that. His job, professionally, was as he made museum quality replicas, but he was known as one of the best, if not the best, jacket preparers in the field of paleontology. He knew all the big paleontologists, and they loved him because he knew what he was talking about. So for those who don't know, when you dig up a dinosaur, you don't just dig up the bones and be like, okay, let's put them in FedEx, right? Because that will destroy the bones. They're very, very fragile. In fact, when you go and you look at a museum, you've almost never seen actual bone. You've seen replicas because they're stone, so they're just too heavy to put up, right? You see replicas. That's what he made. But he also he was a preparer. You'd have these people go out there and they would prepare these, particularly the bigger the fossil, the more you have to prepare it and plaster and so it'll be safe for transport and proper excavation later. That's how he knew these people. A story I'd never heard was Dr. Bob, the guy who runs the Creation Evidence Museum, at Joe's funeral tells this story of actually seeing these fossilized birds, true birds, not just something that kind of looks like it's a true bird. And because he was with Joe, they let him in to go see this. This is again, normal college, university, major paleontologist. They walk in and he shows them these birds that they have a full write-up on them, paper and everything. The problem is people don't want to talk about them because they were found in rock strata supposed to be hundreds of millions of years old. And they're true birds. And you see, this is the problem. People say, well, why don't we see mammals mixed in with dinosaurs? We do. You just aren't allowed to hear about it. They don't talk about it. There's not just the Delk print. There's tons of cases where there's human footprints mixed in with dinosaur tracks or dinosaur strata. Again, my favorite thing right here, the London hammer. This is one of the replicas made by Joe Taylor himself. You saw the real London hammer when you were with me at the Creation Evidence Museum.
Yeah.
This is a hammer that was found, and the thing is, the beauty, the people who found it left it in the rock. This is what the rock actually looks like. They left
so that was the actual one we saw at the museum, right? That was the actual London hammer.
That was the actual London hammer that you saw.
I saw that shit in person, folks. I saw the real thing.
Just like this. It is a hammer. It does not rust.
Did you ever get to touch it, Jason?
No, I haven't had a chance to touch it yet. I want to.
Do you want to?
Yes.
Have you thought about it? Do you like think about it, like, when you go to bed at night?
I mean, Not that extensively, but I have.
But you've daydreamed that. You've at least daydreamed about holding it in your hand.
I have thought about ways to create a situation where I get to touch it. Yes.
Yes.
Maybe just.
And I hope you do, my friend. And I hope you do. And I want to go back.
But back to my point.
Okay.
But back to my point about the London hammer. The reason this is important is this hammer will not rust because it is bonded with chlorine. Iron is very reactive to chlorine, but it created a ferric oxide coating, at least a coating. So it will not rust. This rock, well, obviously this is a replica, but the rock that it's encased in is supposed to be over 200 million years old.
Mm-hmm.
So the problem becomes, and people say, well, no. It just, it's a modern hammer that got washed up into the caliche, and it just the calcium recalcified around it, so it looks like it's been there the entire time. It wasn't there when the rock was formed. Okay, Two problems. A, if that's the case, why hasn't it rusted? Because I assure you, iron will rust.
Mm-hmm.
2, you're telling me that this thing was dropped off in the late 1800s, again, like 1890s, buried and then found 30 years later? Because this was found in 1932 or 36, one of the two. This was found in the 30s. So you're telling me this one hammer, this one exotic hammer, by the way, I can't find, and yes, there is a hammer museum. It exists. I can't find any hammer that looks like this. Made in the last 500 years. Now people will pull up things like, well, it's just any other hammer. And they'll pull up.
Okay, Mike A is asking what kind of rock though.
So it is a sedimentary rock, but it's I'm trying to remember the proper name off the top. This is why I write everything down. So it is a caliche, right? The thing is, the rock in that area was dated to 200 million years old. And by the way, the clam shells it was found fossilized, or the fossil clam shells that was found with are ocean clam shells from that time.
And that's not to say that you personally believe that rock is 200 million years old or whatever.
No,
just that's what mainstream science would say that rock is, based on what mainstream science goes off by.
Right. And so it goes back to, I'm sort of, again, I believe everything breaks, right? I had talked to a friend of mine who's a little bit of a hypochondriac. One of the things I say all the time is everything breaks. If your explanation requires too many things to go right or wrong, I'm out. So it's like, for the London hammer to be a modern hammer, what we have to have is a case of a hammer, a one in a lifetime hammer, is made by one person, because this is not just a normal hammer. It has a point here at the on this side. It's like, you saw it has like a little small indentation here, and it's got 4 prongs here where it's curved. This is like a jeweler's hammer. I've seen hammers similar to this in this sort of idea for doing small, fine jewelry work, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you need somebody walking around London, Texas in the late 1800s with a hammer that they made themselves with metallurgy that no one else has ever duplicated, and that particular person never duplicated. Losing this only one kind of example hammer in that one river, having it buried, encrusted, and then have it eroded away. I'm sorry, that's too many things. That's too many special events, right? For me to buy that story. I'm just not going to buy that. And the problem is, we have all kinds of things that are found in coal mines, where it's like, okay, we're mining coal from scratch, and oh look, we're finding metal objects. Find all the time. We know coal was.
What do you mean, like objects? Objects like
yes.
Utensils and shit, like household goods.
Nails tend to be the most prevalent, but we found a bell.
A bell.
Be a bell that has what looks like a Garuda on the top of it.
Has anyone ever found a blade, like a knife?
Not that I'm aware.
Not that I'm aware of. A knife.
Well, again, maybe I'm just unaware of it. Yeah.
I mean, I would imagine that would be the first thing they'd find if they were actually
Well,
finding metal goods, right? A knife. That would be like the
not
most basic,
necessarily.
ubiquitous thing,
If
right?
again we're talking about if we're talking about a cataclysmic event, right? Then we are talking. Then again, the things that get saved are going to be few and far
Yeah.
between. So you're going to
Hmm.
talk about the most prevalent thing. Well, the most prevalent thing would actually be construction materials.
Hmm.
And again, here's the
Oh, if they
problem.
were advanced like that, then yeah. If they were advanced like
Mhm.
that.
Yeah. So again,
Hmm.
and again, the thing is, we find these oddities all over the planet. Things that
Yeah.
don't fit that conception. And again, I go back to I have seen a living pterosaur, and if I were the only one, I'd say I was crazy and move on with my life, but I'm not. Ken Gerhardt, without last time I asked him, not accounting any of of the things I have taken aside that he is unaware of, or at least was at the time of that conversation, he had over 50 different documented sightings of living pterosaurs in modern times. Okay, so then you throw my 10 or 12 on top of that, and that's just between the two of us. That's not the other people that that are out there that have said, "Hey, I've seen this thing," or "I've seen these things." And that's just us in the modern world. That's not the
Hmm.
many times you have all this lore and legends and mythologies where the story is just, hey, there was this weird critter running around. It was eating things. We killed it. Or, hey, there were these weird things. They were fighting and it scared us and they ran off. Right. Like that's it. Like that's the story.
Jason, I got to ask you this question. Not
Mhm.
to veer off
Yeah.
topic, but sort of on topic, but not veer off too hard, okay?
Hmm.
But I want to
Yeah.
ask you this question. Let's say you were a billionaire, like you had
Oh,
fuck
yeah.
you money, right? Like leisure money, where you can just you're
Hmm.
just a fucking billionaire. You can do whatever the hell you want,
I would be very
right?
dangerous at that point.
Okay. Would you at some point think about going on for a hunt for Mokili Membi
Yes. That's not even a question.
and hire like your own like
Oh,
private like
yes.
PMC dudes like as bodyguards, and you
I,
just go down into the Congo, and I'm like, yo,
if I
Jason's
had
gonna be like,
if I had
"He
billions of
I
dollars,
saw a
I'd be a real
pterosaur.
problem.
Now I'm gonna go see a bronfucking-saurus."
Well, some kind
And
of
then after he finds
theropod.
Mokili Membi, Jason's addiction just grows even worse. He's like, "Fuck it, I need to find me an actual Tyrannosaurus Rex. I heard there was one in Alaska. I'm gonna
I'd find
find it."
well, with that kind of money, I'd find the Elvis.
But Mokili Membi would be top of the list for you, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. Like I would be a real problem real fast for a lot of people. I'd probably be dead within a year because I would be the things I would fund would be a big problem. That's probably why I don't
Hmm.
have money.
Yeah. I would do something different if I were that. I would basically bring back the gladiators, have people, fight to the death for entertainment with like
Well,
swords and
you
shields
don't even have to fund that. I mean, what
and
do
put
you
it on
think inner
pay-per-view.
cities are? What? Yeah, I mean,
And everyone's gonna
that's
be
what.
like, "Oh, it's so awful. You're letting these people kill each other." I'd be like, "Man, but they're all dicks anyway. Fuck them. Have convicts fight to the death."
So China
Yeah, but for entertainment value, they got cool gimmicks like tridents and nets.
also
You
happening
know?
in China. But yeah, I mean, so the simple fact of the matter
Yeah.
is, look, I mean, I just look again. All I want is all the evidence of everything on the table, right? That's my point. I just want all the
Hmm.
evidence on the table. And the problem is when you look at the evidence, again, not just creationism, not just when you put it all on the table, it's like the biblical worldview makes way more sense. Again,
Hmm.
I'm happy to discuss the fine details, but the simple fact of the matter is, what makes the most sense? We have all of these weird events. We have all these things that shouldn't work if their story is correct, or is it the things that you would expect to find if the biblical story is correct? And not just the biblical story, every world religion's story.
Hmm.
Everyone says there was an age before the gods came. There were dragons during that time. There was a flood, and giants were there, and there was a flood, and now we're all and everything else survived that event. That is basically every classic world religion, period.
Maybe the reason why the Nephilim were so powerful back then was because they were like dinosaur herders.
Or maybe it's because of the oxygen content.
Or maybe they
Most
had
of-
like their own
most
like
of the
attack
large-
T-Rexes, and they would just sick them on people.
Oh,
And
seriously?
then that would be like, yeah, we were like grasshoppers to them. They would just sick their T-Rexes on us.
Oh no, seriously. So
yeah,
you didn't know this. I don't think I've even talked to you about this. One of the arguments that's out there, and I think has got a lot of power behind it. Now, again, I do think Ninurta is actually Nimrod from a lore perspective from the Sumerians, because he he's a hunter god, that kind of thing. However, there's also the story, I forget the name off the top of my head, I just forgot it. Anyway, as far as the actual king was Nimrod, like that was his Inmerkar, that's his name. There's a lot of theory that Inmerkar was Gilgamesh, or not Gilgamesh, but Inmerkar was actually Nimrod. Like those stories are his kingly stories of what he was doing. There is a story in the Sumerian text about Inmerkar and Lord Arata, and that they were trying to, and that essentially Inmerkar is like, hey, I just want to make peace with you, but there's this point where they were fighting, and Lord Arata released dragons in this fight that killed a lot of Inmerkar's men. A lot of people have said, okay, if Inmerkar is Nimrod, is Nimrod from the Bible, Arata seems phonetically very, very close to Ararat. Is this the story of Noah and literally Noah and Nimrod fighting? And if that is the case, then did Noah actually like keep pet dinosaurs as guard dogs? And that's what happened. He literally unleashed these dinosaurs on people. Literally, your theory,
or like an attack of Triceratops.
Yeah.
If you had a herd of trained Triceratops, you could fuck shit up pretty good, I think.
Oh yeah. Oh, there's accounts in Britain and Ireland, and relatively within the last 1,000 years, of seeing creatures that look very, very similar, and basically just being a real nuisance, where they were just being there. There again, Chinese emperors were drawn by dragons that they had captured and tamed, and a lot of people have said these look look very similar. Not the traditional Chinese dragon, right? Although I think you could argue they look actually very, very close to Megalania, which is a giant Komodo dragon. But some of these descriptions of these very specific dragons that pulled the emperor's chariot in these parades look kind of like ankylosaurs or related species. So yes, there's a lot of bad information out there from people who are just looking for things. I'm right there with you. But there's also good information out there that, again, when you really look, it's like, okay, hold on. This doesn't comport with what we are being told is real. Again, what does the data actually say? And the problem is, when you look at what the data actually says, the data does not support tens of millions of years from the extinction of these animals to today. It just doesn't support it. In fact, what's supported is the biblical view, which is we're talking about thousands of years that these creatures and us did coexist and still coexist today. There you have it.
Okay, so Jason, I'm going to offer you my point of view.
Okay.
Where I will at the same time agree with you, but also shit on your argument.
Go for it.
To the answer to the original question.
Mm-hmm.
The original question was, as someone who believes in the creation story or the biblical worldview, as do I, right? Yeah. See, I'm thinking of a scenario where both are true. The 60 or not even 65 million, just like millions and millions. But then the biblical worldview, I'm trying to think of a scenario where they both make sense, right? So if someone were to, the same question I asked you, if they were to ask me that same question, well, what about dinosaurs? I'd be like, well, you don't think God can time travel? Duh.
I like that.
It's like God can do anything. And I'm like, time travel. See? Simple.
It is. That is simple. Well, we
Time
kind of
travel,
actually
bitch.
talked about that.
Time
Yeah, on
travel.
that. Well, we did kind of
Time
talk
travel.
about that
That's
on
it.
one.
Time travel.
Yeah, time travel.
Just
I
say
mean,
time travel. Just shrug and say time travel and just walk away next time someone says that to you. Just be like
I
time
like
travel.
that. I may steal
Time
that
travel.
one. Time
God
travel.
time travels. You
Yeah.
don't think God can time travel? How
Yeah.
come no one ever imagines God time traveling? Of course he knows the future. He's been there.
Yeah.
And you know why I think the London Hammer exists? Because
Time
God
travel.
probably time travels a lot. And he's probably pretty busy. He's like time traveling all over the place to the point where he's like pretty exhausted. He's just like losing track of random shit. He's like, whoops, I dropped my hammer.
Or he put it there deliberately because, like,
Yeah.
okay, you're gonna find this is
He's
gonna
like,
be
damn,
found
this
here.
is so much time traveling. Damn.
Yeah.
How come no one ever imagines God time traveling? Time travel. That's it.
Actually, and I got into trouble for this one. Can I tell you a story of my view on that as far as
Please.
God and time that got me into trouble? Everyone tries to argue predestination versus foreknowledge, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what, and I would argue, and my point is, well, hold on. If both are found sort of in scripture, maybe the problem is the answer is bigger than what we can comprehend, and he's just trying to he's trying to put it in ways we understand given the context of each verse.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the metaphor I used. Let's say Adam is talking to God. We got him on camera, right? Let's say we have this videotape or whatever, and we see Adam talking to God,
Mm-hmm.
and then we see Paul talking to God in a room. Okay, so we have this video, and now we see you talking in a room. We're watching the tape all together, right? And midway through each person's conversation, we see God take a drink of coffee. Okay, that is not God drinking the same cup of coffee 3 different times.
Mm-hmm.
Or 3 different cups of coffee at 3 different times. That is God drinking the same cup of coffee at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that we're seeing 3 different, events. We're seeing one event, but he's there in all three time frames having that conversation. He's not in time. He's entirely out of time. So to your point of time travel, I think the problem is that's actually way truer than people realize. He's not looking in he knows the future because he's there. He knows the past because he's there. He knows the present because he's there. He is omnipresent.
Also, I can think of another instance. Okay, I have this other theory that kind of the opposite. What if God actually doesn't know the future because he's actually not interested in finding out? What if you were to go up to God and ask him, like, hey, what am I going to do tomorrow? And God's like, hey, I'm just as curious as you are.
I don't think
maybe
that would
he's
actually
just kind of like sitting back and just like, I'm not even trying to predict what you guys do. I want to see what you guys do. I don't know. Don't ask me. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I don't think God does not. Einstein said God does not play cards with the universe. I tend to think that's true. He may not be able to not know. Like he may just be. It's like if I don't know, it's because it doesn't happen and you cease to exist, kind of a thing.
Yeah, maybe.
So yeah, that tends to be how I think about it. I think we exist literally within him. I think the problem is we think, oh well, God, the person that is seen in the Bible on the throne, that's God. No, I tend to think, again, one of those things that gets me into trouble. I tend to think that's his avatar. That's as much of him that can exist in the universe and exist, and then the universe itself exist. He's outside the universe entirely. That means even not just our physical, but like the spiritual world as well. He's outside of all of it. We are all literally within him. And so he's omnipresent in all things. And it's, when you see him on the throne, that's as much of him as can exist in our universe and not just destroy it from sheer power. So again, if he doesn't know what's coming, it's probably because it won't happen. And it doesn't
like the
exist
architect in the Matrix, he was kind of like, there were certain parts where he's like, I don't care. I don't know what you guys are going to do. You guys just do what you do.
Right? Well, I think it's more of it's not he doesn't know. He's not necessarily.
Well, he's trying to control the outcome. Yeah, he's trying to predict.
Well, I think God actually wants.
There's an element of like unpredictability and chaos, and part of it is like to see and to observe and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, to a point. I think
feel like this is all kind of God's experiment.
I wouldn't go so
And the
far
whole
as to say
point of an
experiment.
experiment is you want to find out what happens,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I don't think it's about finding out. It's about playing it out. But again, in the same way, I think we have way more free will than we want to think we do. I'm
Mhm.
not a fatalist, but I'm also not someone who just thinks that the universe is random either. I think
Mm.
the problem is it's more complicated than that.
Yeah, I
And
find
people don't,
myself I'm more in the middle.
yeah. I think people don't
Yeah.
like ambiguity. Like I said, I'm willing to say, look, I don't know if it's 5 or 7 or 6 or 7 or 15. In fact, I really don't care.
Hmm.
Whatever one it is, right? It's not my preference. My thing is, what's the overall worldview? How does that work out? Because there's the how and the why.
Mhm.
I care more about the why than I do the how. But I think for us to
Yeah.
know the how, we have to just have all the data on the table. And the problem is we don't have all the data on the table because there's too many
Mm.
people whose paychecks require that data not being there.
Do you want to answer this question or shall I?
Go for it. I don't think it's
Okay,
either or.
my view.
Mhm.
Outside the observable universe, if you are somehow magically able to zoom past beyond that,
Mhm.
my own personal view is that we will find ourselves as the organ or the beating heart of a thing, a living thing. And it's like an organ inside of a living thing. And that's just the universe itself is just a piece of this greater being. And then we zoom out even further, and then we realize, oh, there are multiple of these beings with multiple universes inside, and the universe is like an organ or a thing that makes it function. And then beyond that, who knows?
Interesting. I would just say something else.
But I cannot
Mhm.
say that I take credit for that because that's based off a podcast episode I was
Mhm.
listening to on Joe Rogan about a dude who
Mhm.
had a trip on ibogaine, and that's what he saw. So I was like, yeah, that's probably right.
I like the data. Yeah, I tend to think we focus too hard on those things we can't know, and I would just say it's something else, right? And because here's the problem. What do we, not to throw another wrench in the whole thing, but what do we even mean by visual universe? Like, we think we know what we mean when we say stuff like that, but I don't think we even really understand what we mean when we say that.
That's why I said observable universe,
Yeah.
because based
But
off
even
our
that,
current
it's like,
understanding of like our telescopes and our understanding of like the
yeah, no,
distances
and I
within the
know, but that's what I'm
universe.
saying is
Yeah.
we say that because that's the best way we have of conceiving it. The problem is we say that like we use that phrase like we know what it is, and the problem is we may not really even understand what that means. Like that's where things get like, I'm very sympathetic to the whole simulation theory crowd. I just say congratulations,
Well,
you've caught
what
up to
about the astronomy
4,000 years.
crowd though? What about the astrophysics crowds? What about the people? What about like, the
Oh, I think
galaxies
it's
and the
there.
clusters and
It's all there. It's clockwork. It's the clockwork of the universe.
I do like me neutron stars. I think those things are pretty dope.
Oh, they are. No, it's all dope
Until they cross into our solar system and
until it
fucking
destroys
annihilate
us.
us
Yeah,
completely. Yeah.
but I don't think we need
Until
to
we're
worry about that
completely
one.
fucking wiped out as until God just decides to like just pull the plug. He's like, okay, this whole Earth game stops now, and he just sends
Yeah.
a fucking neutron star
Oh,
into the
fuck
solar
you.
system, and yeah, that's a wrap.
Yeah. Well, but again, it goes back to that's how it is. Like I said, I'm sympathetic
Yeah.
to the people who do the simulation theory. I'm just like, congratulations, you've caught up on 4,000 years of human history, of human
Mm.
theological thought. Congratulations.
Yeah.
I like it as a metaphor because I think it works as a metaphor. The problem is it is, right? It's like the clockwork has to work. So it does. And so
Yep.
we observe the clockwork thinking it made itself often. And it's like, no, it's clockwork. It's evidence of a creator who's paying a lot of attention.
Yep.
That's the bigger thing. It's like, Romans even says like, no one's really got an excuse on this one. It's kind of obvious.
Anyway, I hate to cut this short. I feel like I could go longer, but then I just realized, oh man, I got actually another podcast to go
Yeah,
on in
you
a
got to
couple
you got to
minutes.
go help out Tex over on Danielle Diva's
I was
show.
like, oh shit, I gotta get prepared. Sorry,
Yeah,
guys.
I did
We
that
shall
one
have to
last week.
continue this again, Jason McLean. But before we sign out,
Mhm.
do you have any final thoughts or words?
I mean, final words.
Yeah.
The world isn't what you think it is,
Mm.
but at the same time, it's also these things matter. They do, right? But they aren't the ends of themselves. I don't care what Bigfoot is per se. I would like to know what it is. That's great, but only because I want to put it in its appropriate place. Same thing with dinosaurs. Did they die 4,000 years ago or 5,000 years ago or 15? Is irrelevant to me. What is the what do their existence and their continual living tell us about the world we live in? Right? Astronomy, eschatology, all these things tell us what the world is. And again, the fine details is great, but the details aren't the end. For me, what matters is, what are they telling you? For me, I think it says the Bible is true. If the beginning of the book is true, the end of the book is true, that means the middle of the book is true. And that's where the important stuff is, because that's where we actually live.
So my final thought will be a question to you, a final question.
Okay.
Jason.
Yes.
Next time some random asshole walks up to you and is just like, "Nyam, nyam, 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 Bible, nyam, 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 dinosaurs," what is going to be your actual response at that point, sir?
I would say, Donnie, get bent.
No, the answer was supposed to be, you were supposed to say, "Oh, time travel," shrug and
Time
just
travel.
walk away.
Time travel.
Yeah, fuck you.
I
Time
knew
travel.
I knew what you were going. You didn't let me get there. I had the bit.
Oh,
Time travel. You got to put more faith in me, Donnie.
I thought.
Do you want to go out with an extra sound? Hold on. Here you go. Here you go. There you go.
What is that? Oh,
your extra.
Oh, yeah. And so I will be on Texas Front Porch in a few minutes, guys. I'm going to be filling in for Tex. Danielle is still out. So I'll be Asian Danielle tonight. And we'll leave it at that.
All right.
Peace.